Will the game in Athens be the only college football contest worth tuning in for Week 12? I know if you aren't a fan of the Longhorns or Bulldogs, but my question to you is the game you plan to watch that week bigger than the rematch of 2024's SEC championship game? Yeah, two big questions to answer for this week. Anyways, the games for another November weekend starts with Clemson's ACC test to pass with a date against Louisville. Could the Cardinals make it tricky again for the Tigers? South Carolina makes another tough SEC road trip, this time to College Station, and face Texas A&M. Will these two have records good enough to make this game affect the SEC championship or the next playoff tournament? The final matchup is the Texas Longhorns heading to Athens for a battle with the Georgia Bulldogs. Can Sark finally get one over Kirby? Let's dive into this week of November football for the 2025 season. Game 1. Louisville hosts the Clemson Tigers. The Cardinals last season earned their first ever win over the premier ACC program. It was a huge mess for Dabo and the Tigers because they couldn't get drives going. The defense lacked containment of the Louisville running game, and Clemson were unable to put pressure in the Cardinals' pocket. I think these issues for Dabo and his staff need to be addressed for this meeting in Sluggerville. Starting with the program we haven't talked about at all for our SpOp previews and have just featured in our honorable mentions. Louisville, who come into 2025 with the 31st ranked portal class. In that haul of players from college football free agency, one of the standouts is Miller Moss. Moss comes in from USC, where he started the 2024 season as QB1. But unfortunately, because of an impatient staff and fan base, lost a job towards the end of the season. He should fit in well the Louisville offense because of his Big Ten experience and competitiveness he brings. In the backfield with him, two talented running backs returned for the 2025 season, Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. The pair combined for over 1,700 yards and 18 touchdowns on the ground for the 2024 campaign. Along with those backs, the arsenal for Louisville out wide will have a decent amount of options for the new quarterback Moss, with some guys already on campus and new blood coming from the portal. Same goes for the new offensive line for the Cardinals. Head coach Jeff Brom brings in 6 transfer linemen. There will definitely be some reshuffling before this matchup, but the depth to find the right combination by the time Louisville gets to this game on their schedule should be there. The last bit for the Cardinals offense is at tight end, another position with an overhaul to mention, with 3 new players coming in to help replace Mark Redmond, who was also a transfer for Louisville in 2024. The tight ends will be key for this offense against Clemson, picking up first downs through the air and keeping drives going to break down a Tiger defense that will be one of the best in the country this season. For the Cardinal defense, they will have the whole linebacker core back for 2025. Great to be solid in that area because they will have to again be big contributors in stopping and maintaining the Clemson running game. I think a player Cardinal fans are going to love that is transferring in, Gleb Lubin from Coastal Carolina. Lubin had 9.5 sacks last season. He should continue causing mayhem in the backfield, but in a red and black jersey. The unit that is going to have to play lights out is the Louisville secondary. Just like the offensive line, Brom has also overhauled the back end of the defense, with 5 new players coming in. Whoever out of these pickups and players already on campus will need to continue to hold up Kate Klubnik through the air. If this game was earlier in the season, Louisville would be in a bit of trouble with the influx of new players acclimating to each other and the defense. Good thing this game is later on the 2025 schedule for Jeff Brom to get his Cardinals eggs in order. Now to the away team Clemson, who we have dived into for Week 1 against LSU, Week 6 against North Carolina, and Week 8 against SMU. Some tough tests for Dabo and his Tigers, but should have the roster to pass. The same goes for this game with Louisville, who got the best of them last time out, although the Tigers on paper don't need to make massive changes on the offensive side to win this game because they didn't turn the ball over or allow Louisville's offense to outgain them. Shoot, Clemson went 5 for 6 on 4th down. The Tigers just need to finish drives and find that extra gear to keep the chains moving, at least for the offense. For the defense, Clemson needs to get some sacks, as they didn't record a single one against Louisville in 2024 and only had 3 tackles for loss. The front 6 needs efficient penetration. This approach should let the Tigers from allowing Louisville to dictate this game on the ground. The last area that's pretty obvious for Clemson to address is special teams. Field goal unit has to prevent any leaks to the kicker for potential blocks. And the kickoff return squad needs to not let a cheeky onside kick to be recovered. Clemson special teams must prepare for the unexpected to play a clean weekend of football. Again, a lot of simple issues this very talented Tiger team can fix. So, if Louisville and Jeff Brom can play some clever football with a home crowd behind them, the Cardinals could make it 2 in a row. And if Clemson can get rid of the mental mistakes, this game, like in the 8 previous to last season, should go their way. Can't wait to tune in for this matchup, as it is, for me, one of the few exciting games the ACC has to offer in conference. Game 2, we are in SEC country for South Carolina at Texas A&M. The Gamecocks, up until recently, were losing this contest every time. That changed when Shane Beamer was hired, as South Carolina has multiple wins over the Aggies since his debut, but not one in College Station yet. Let's start with Texas A&M. Now, we have covered the Aggies in some previous SpOp previews, first with Week 3's games, Week 9 against LSU, and we'll have another after this week's games. Straight up, the Aggies' defensive front 6 has to show up. The D-line needs to dig in deep by containing Sellers and the Gamecocks on the ground. Linebackers Scooby Williams and Tarian York have to scrape and stuff those holes. This group for A&M in the 2024 game allowed double their average rushing yards given up. They have to come correct. I would mention the South Carolina O-line is going to be a bit different this time around, but this is in Week 12. Whoever's starting will be experienced enough and are going to be worn in by this part of the season, except for injuries. It's a hard ask to contain Sellers, but this defense has all that it needs to keeping the star quarterback somewhat quiet. The offense, just like the D, has to dominate in the trenches. The game in Columbia last year, A&M were held to 40 less yards on the ground than compared to their average per game. This forced their young quarterback Marcel Reed to air it out. We know that didn't work out so well because the Aggies gave up 2 turnovers with that approach. Also, I know it's another year for Reed, as many have talked about his improvements in delivering it through the air, but I'll believe it when I see it, which means the run attack will be the bread and butter for a successful date with the Gamecocks. If A&M can't establish a proper running game, Shane Beamer's chances of making it 2 in a row, as well as getting South Carolina's first ever win in College Station, will be beaming up. Now to the away team, who we have covered 4 times in our SpOp previews for 2025. First, going back to Week 4 against Missouri, Week 7 against LSU, Week 9 against Alabama, Week 10 against Ole Miss, and just like for A&M, Brody here has another in the chamber after this one. We just have a lot to talk about for the South Carolina Gamecocks because of the possibilities of an epic run by this program. One of the main drivers why is Lenore Sellers. As we discussed, the Gamecocks' offensive line, weapons in the backfield, and out wide, but haven't talked about this very crafty quarterback. As the more I look into South Carolina, the more I believe in this redshirt sophomore who had over 3,000 total yards, 25 total touchdowns in the 12 games he was featured last season. and only threw 7 interceptions. Where can number 16 improve? Well, getting the ball out of the pocket. Obviously you want it for a completion, but just throwing it away when nothing is there works too. That should reduce the amount of sacks and unnecessary turnovers for South Carolina. Slide in note, Sellers wasn't sacked at all against A&M in 2024. But still, the Gamecocks quarterback has to protect the ball on the run or in the pocket, because Sellers had 7 fumbles last year. If he cleans this up and continues to light up opposing teams on the ground and through the air, South Carolina could get their first Heisman finalist since George Rogers, who won the prestigious award back in the 1980 season. But that is assuming Sellers gets rid of these mental mistakes. So, can A&M run the ball or slow down the Gamecocks offense? And can South Carolina stuff the Aggie run game to force them to pass it more than they would want to? Man, the SEC is just jam-packed with programs with a lot of potential. But sadly, they have to play each other and someone has to lose in those games. However, I can't wait to find out which 3 SEC teams make the next college football playoff. Honorable mentions for Week 12. The Florida Gators are in Oxford to battle Ole Miss. Kiffin, please put the Gators down this time. And Alabama hosts the Oklahoma Sooners in T-Town. Will the Tide get embarrassed again, but at home? Sorry, not much for this weekend, unless you think Indiana will be something special, so their game against Wisconsin matters, or Kansas State on the road in Stillwater, which I'm thinking is more of a possible upset, but that's if Oklahoma State is good enough to elevate this state. The final game keeps us in the Southeastern Conference for one of the most anticipated bouts of the 2025 season. Texas, Georgia, Longhorns, Bulldogs, Sark, Smart, for the 3rd time in 13 months. We are truly #blessed as college football fans, because these 2 SEC juggernauts are set to duke it out once again. The last time these 2 met, Georgia came out on top both times with a 30-15 victory in Austin and made it 2 in a row with an overtime win in the SEC championship game. Wouldn't be surprised if these 2 premier programs line up again for another December date for a conference title. Let's begin with the home team, Georgia. We haven't talked about the Bulldogs since Week 8 for the Ole Miss game and discussed the reigning SEC champs in Week 5 against Alabama, plus Week 3 for their first SEC opponent, Tennessee. For this one against the Longhorns, Georgia can't rely on turnovers again, as the Bulldogs got 3 in the October matchup and 2 for the December meeting. The pair of turnovers for the SEC title ended up being 14 points. This is good to strive for, but Texas will look to stop this trend that they can actually control. Again, I don't think that luxury of turnovers will come so easy. I also expect the Georgia D-line will be crucial in this contest, as they were in 2024, with Texas only averaging 30 yards on the ground. Yes, only 30 for 4 quarters. Stellar run defense for Kirby's Dogs, but I expect Georgia's run defense to be a little bit more leaky this time around. Just need to keep it close to that average number, or at least under 100 yards. This just makes the Longhorn play calls obvious for long down scenarios. Actually, Texas's OT win over ASU in the quarterfinals and the loss to the Buckeyes in the Cotton Bowl, the Longhorns were held under 60 yards for each game. Stall the run and you most likely get the dub at home. One thing that needs to be addressed for the Georgia offense is protecting Gunnar Stockton in the pocket and for quarterback design run plays. Can't have Stockton getting smoked when he passes the line of scrimmage, because when we do our watch along on November 15th for this massive SEC bout, I don't want to feel like I experience a hit the Georgia quarterback takes. If you watch this vid before this game takes place, consider joining me in the trenches of my couch again on November 15th. Anyways, back to Georgia. Hopefully, like we said in the game against Bama in our SpOp preview, Georgia needing to get the ball rolling for the run game. This keeps the Texas offense off the field, which is essential. Again, stuff the Longhorns run, even though Georgia doesn't have the same players that got them those numbers for the last 2 meetings, this should make it harder for Arch Manning to find his rhythm. Plus, pounding the rock effectively will keep their defense more fresh. Now to the away team, Texas. We have only covered the Longhorns a couple of times for the 2025 season. First with a big game against Ohio State in Week 1, and Week 7 for the 121st meeting with Oklahoma. A generous schedule for Texas, as they only have 3 opponents that have potential rosters to make the playoffs. The Bulldogs will take Texas to their limits for this matchup in Athens, compared to other teams the Longhorns will come up against. But Texas should be able to throw a few lethal combos when defending, as I do think the Longhorns have one of the best defenses, if not the best, going into 2025. For this bout, the key group is the front 4 of Texas, because the linebackers and secondary are pretty stacked and will deliver on their ends. If Texas can freeze out the Georgia running game, the away team is in business with getting a huge conference win on the road. This is because I don't see things going well if you force Stockton to pass it a bit more than what the Bulldogs will probably be planning. This is the area I'm going to keep an eye on all game, because it's well known that Texas doesn't do any fancy stunts, just keeps it simple with a base pass rush. For the Longhorn offense, well, it's a bit obvious because we mentioned that they didn't average more than 30 yards on the ground. That has to change to allow this offensive scheme to operate. If you can't run the ball, you're going to telegraph most of your play calls, and long downs are going to be even harder to convert. Sark needs to be better at attacking between the tackles, and when getting the wide receivers involved on the ground, they get around the edge. Georgia last year was tremendous in stopping the Longhorns sweeping out wide. Another if Texas doesn't achieve this run mission, Arch Manning will have to come clutch on this night. Maybe it will turn out to be a signature game to put the nail in the coffin for him to have a date in NYC. Or maybe a disastrous game of 4 quarters in Athens. Again, stall the Bulldogs' run attack and establish their own ground and pound. Texas has to avoid the overload of airing it out too much. So, regardless of the result of this heavyweight matchup, either team will still have a good chance at making the conference title game. That means there may be some holding of the cards for both head coaches, especially if each of these 2 top programs meet with 1 to no loss records. This is one of the few SEC matchups that has this caveat, because both will be participating in the postseason. Just which part will it be? Okay, we'll see you guys again for some more week-by-week previews for the 2025 college football season. And bye-bye for now from the couch.